Caro, we've got a tight schedule tonight. Right off the top, you tell me what you know, I'll tell you what I know. You go first.
Well, Ed, so much has changed in a week. So much has changed in 2 days. Gillon McLachlan has been dealing, as we know, with all the state governments, all of the premiers. What we have now is a return to what is going to look like a home and away season. Not 144 games, but 16 rounds. I still believe the season will kick off in June. Mid-June is the hope. I think that the AFL is so determined not to crash bang into the Spring Racing Carnival that the hope is that you will play a round of footy every single week leading up to a grand final on October 21, I believe is the preferred date.
Yeah, the Cox Plate weekend in
Cox
racing
Plate
parlance.
weekend,
yeah.
Exactly. So, and I think the AFL have given racing, the VRC, their assurance that they will do everything they can to avoid the Spring Racing Carnival.
And Melbourne Racing Club have said they're happy to go on the Friday night at Moonee Valley, so it could work beautifully for everybody.
It could. And so if you were to kick off on Thursday, June 11, which is very optimistic, you would play a round of footy every week with none of the 4 or 5 day breaks. Teams would play, most teams, we'll come to this in a minute, play at their home grounds, and you would get the season away. You would also be able to not worry about, as I said, the 4 day breaks. The broadcasters are really happy with this.
Yes.
Because they want Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday and the occasional Monday games, which brings me to what is going to happen with the Collingwood Football Club. Is it true that you have been keen to even bring forward the season to June 8, which is a Queen's Birthday Monday, and play Melbourne and honour the Neil Danaher fundraiser? Yeah,
we've all been talking about it. I spoke with Bill Guest today and Neil, through Neil Danaher, and Lewis Martin at Channel 7, who's organising it. So they've got a plan in place to do something spectacular. If we could play on the Queen's birthday, that would be right. But at the moment, with things being pushed back, it doesn't look like we'll get the pre-season in to do so. But we'll still try and play that. Maybe that might be the first game, Collingwood and Melbourne. And if it is, obviously we'll do something big for the Neil Danaher situation. So it's a bit fluid at the moment. Ideally, we all would have loved to have opened up round 2, Queen's birthday, Collingwood, Melbourne, MCG, and do it for Neil and have all the fun of the fair. But it may not land that way, but we're working towards something great.
Can I ask you then, just on that, Collingwood, Melbourne, they weren't meant to play in round 2, but has the fixture been flipped on its head then in that regard?
The fixture has been flipped on its head, but there's so many things still to be decided that I think when Gillon McLachlan speaks about a season start date on Monday or Tuesday of next week, that the full fixture will not be revealed, only a start date and a return to training date. What is obviously the spanner in the works, and there's a couple, but the big one, and Sam McClure reported this on Monday night, is the West Australian government. You've got some news on that end, and I know I want to ask you, Ross, but let's have a listen to the WA Premier, Mark McGowan, today.
We're not going to compromise on our hard borders just to meet the needs of football. Our football teams have been disadvantaged by the football hierarchy for a long period of time. And if that's what happens, well, then that would be a further disadvantage for West Australian teams. What I'd say to the AFL is the hub arrangement in which teams were going to move to Western Australia and play football was a great arrangement.
Yes, sadly won't happen because flying into Western Australia would mean teams would be quarantined for 14 days. So what likely now is to happen is that 2 West Australian teams will have to come out and be in a hub. The South Australians may, but they can fly in and fly out. So they can stay at home, train at home and fly in and fly out if the borders don't come down. Everyone is still hopeful that the borders will come down. But Western Australia are pretty adamant at the moment. So Caroline and Ross, particularly to you and to LLOYD, there is an opportunity now, and I think everyone in football, to be fair, the least we can possibly do is allow West Coast and Fremantle to decide where they play. So if they come and make the hub in Melbourne, if they're playing Richmond or Collingwood, for example, they can say, well, we'll play you at Marvel Stadium. But we might set up our base in Queensland. We might go up to the Gold Coast. We could go to Sydney. We could go to Adelaide. No, you won't go to Adelaide.
Do you think they'll be allowed to bring their families along?
I think there'll have to be, some consideration.
We're looking at a 6-week,
I think
whatever.
We'll do everything we possibly can. But Ross, I want to put it to you. If you're the coach of either of those sides, do you say, right, here's our chance to play at the MCG? Or do we say, right, OK, let's get an advantage, let's make the Victorian teams fly and come up to us and we'll make the most of a bad situation and turn it into a training camp up on the Gold Coast?
Well, I think it's a real opportunity and a luxury Western Australian teams have really hoped for a long time, and that's multiple games at the MCG. I think it's the home of football. It's where the grand final is going to be played into 2057. And West Coast are right in the hunt, and Fremantle Dockers a young developing list. Why wouldn't you want to expose them to Melbourne, the culture of football, and in particular, multiple games at the MCG? I think it's an exciting opportunity and development. I think you could take the easier path, the warmth, the climate of the Gold Coast, and a quieter time, and a neutral ground for opposition. But I'd be imploring my club, if I was there, to go, let's get to the home of football and grow and develop the MCG and take it on and experience a cold Melbourne winter and the conditions you may play the last game in.
And do they have to drop the oh me, oh my? Even the Premier's carrying on about how hard it is for...
Well, in fairness, that was in response to a question from a journo which said, doesn't that make it a bit unfair for the two AFL teams?
Still set it. Just say what Ross said. This is a great opportunity. That's what you want to be looking at.
Carrie, sorry, can I say, when we saw the reaction from some players about the 20 weeks, Ross, from players, what they might have to do, is that a possibility, or that West Coast and Fremantle could be here, or wherever they choose, for 20 weeks?
Well, I mean, there's every hope that the West Australian border restrictions... There was a view from the AFL originally September, so obviously it would change before then, or even August. The other interesting issue that's arisen, Ed, is how the games are going to be played. I want to play the comments of your coach, Nathan Buckley, who is working with the AFL on a return to play model.
I mean, they could play. We could play 3 days after returning, but you're not going to get quality. You are going to get athletes that are sore, and you will lose guys. 3 weeks, 4 weeks might be enough, but I believe that the slowly ramping it up, or more gradually ramping it up, is going to be important to actually look after the players and still get the product out at the end.
So the coaches obviously are insisting on 4 weeks. AFL probably would have liked 3. The absolute onus has been on player, not player mental welfare as much as physical welfare. You can't have short breaks at the start of the season because of the lack of training. Channel 7 and Fox Footy are asking for longer breaks during games if they're only going to be 16-minute quarters. So half-time will be significantly longer, so it works with the broadcasters into the news, etc. I believe Steve Hocking and his team will allow extended benches because of the nature of the lead up to this start of the season. So that'll be the decision made, Ed, over the next few days. It's going to be a really interesting return to footy. And I don't think your coach... He would have loved the romance of playing on the Queen's birthday, but perhaps not.
But, we'll make the best of whatever the situation. Yeah. Ross, it's a game of attrition, though. I mean, at some stage, players get injured. So.
Well, it is. And, look, they've had a real win already. The fact that there's not going to be multiple games in 3 weeks, 5 games in 3 weeks, what they were talking about to get the season crammed in and done, the fact that it's going to run on a normal tempo, 1 game a week over normal breaks, basically.
There might be cramming right at the end for 1.
OK, but that's okay.
And there won't be an end of season pre-finals bye, by the way.
I can tell you now, the high-performance managers around the country will hear what you've said tonight about the draw, and they'll breathe a big sigh of relief because it takes enormous pressure on them and they can get going a little bit earlier. So